Welcome, everyone. My name is Josh Schneps. I'm the publisher of Brownstoner and Schneps Media. I want to thank you all for being here to hear from our great group of panelists that are going to be giving tips on buying a condo or co-op in the Brooklyn market. It's a hot market, but there's a lot to learn. Many people, this is going to be the largest investment they're making in their lives, and you want to make sure that you have the right advice and guidance from top professionals, and we're really thrilled to have them with us here today. I'd love to just introduce our panelists, and I want to thank our sponsors, which include GR Affinity, Chaves, Perlowitz, and Luftig, and the Aguayo team of Brown, Harris, Stevens. So we're going to have a great conversation. I think just getting started, I'd love each panelist to just introduce themselves. Bryan, would you like to get started?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for having me. So I'm Bryan Scott Cohen. I am a mortgage guy, super exciting stuff. Been doing this for close to 20 years. We handle residential loans, 1 to 4 family houses, specialize in new construction financing, condos, co-ops, and townhouses. And excited to be here. And hopefully you guys learn something and take some tips away from our call today.
I can't go on to the next person without mentioning that Bryan helped my mother get financing, and literally the best rate I think is like ever available in the history of the world. I mean, it's really amazing what's going on right now with the opportunity to get great interest rates. So I just want to share that, you really helped achieve a tremendous goal, and you were very helpful and professional throughout the whole process. So for all those listening, I have firsthand knowledge. He did a great job for myself. Andrew.
Yes, it's good to see everybody. Excited to be here. Andrew Luftig. I'm a partner at Chaves, Perlowitz, Luftig. We are, of course, real estate attorneys. We represent buyers, sellers of condo, co-ops, townhouses. We also represent most of the major banks on residential financing, including guaranteed rate, which helps facilitate the transactions. We have an estate planning department, a landlord tenant department. So we call ourselves life event firm. We're not litigators. We're transactional attorneys. And just something that's really popping up now, we have a pretty deep international team. So with the borders opening up November 8th, we're excited about that. We have attorneys that work with clients all around the world. So, but appreciate the opportunity and looking forward to chatting about the wonderful world of New York City real estate.
Terrific. Thank you, Andrew. Vanessa.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. My name is Vanessa Connelly. I am a manager with the Aguayo team. I've been in the industry about 15 years now, working predominantly in the new development market. I started out working on site in buildings, a lot of buyers and brokers coming into specific buildings, and then went on to be the vice president with BHS and Halstead Development Marketing. And I'm back in the field selling, and I'm loving it, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone that, these group of professionals are here to support you. We're here to answer your questions. I have a lot of great questions to get through, but if you do have questions, please use the Q&A and chat. If the panelists themselves can answer them, they will. Again, this is being recorded, and we will be emailing you all each of their contact information. So, they are here to answer your questions, and they're here obviously to hopefully support you in your buying process in the future. So Vanessa, let's start with you. You discussed some of the types of deals that you've done, but you've helped home hunters buy and sell in new development condos, resale condos, and co-ops. Could you just give us a little overview of the pros and cons of the 3 different property types and how home hunters can know which one is right for them?
Sure. I mean, I think it's really going to start with what you're looking for. If you're specifically looking for a neighborhood, a type of architecture, a lot of outdoor space, things like that, certain types of property are going to lend themselves better to what your search is. But as far as the various pieces go, I started out with new development. I love new development. I think it's a pretty simple transaction when you're buying from a sponsor. Depending on when you're coming in the process, you can sometimes get the pick of a line, the pick of the floor. And as far as packages and things like that go, you're not going to have any of that. With condos in a resale market, I think, the best thing that you can have is someone that really knows the board well, whether that's a a small 3-family self-managed, or you're getting into something larger with the management company, just to help advise on how that closing process is going to go, what's going to be necessary. And then with co-ops, sometimes people really want co-ops. They like the building itself. More work as far as packages goes, but if you have somebody working with you, they can guide you effectively on that. And there's a way to do them all. I think a lot of it just really has to do with what you're specifically looking for and having somebody to guide you.
Thank you. Thank you. All good information. Andrew, kind of similar question for you. As a lawyer, what should people know that's different or the same between buying those different types of homes?
Yeah, let's start with condos and co-op resales. The process is pretty similar, right? We're going to work on due diligence and contract negotiations. Due diligence, a lot of the buildings will have managing agents that we reach out to get board minutes, financial statements. We send a questionnaire. I always tell clients, my initial discussion with them, it's all about really educating them, giving them a comfort level. I don't want clients losing sleep over the deal. So we are, obviously extremely thorough in obtaining information, and especially in the Brooklyn market, the buildings tend to be smaller, self-managed. So one way or another, we're going to get the information we need to educate the clients and analyze the information. The contracts, are certainly different for co-ops and condos, but the negotiation process is similar, right? The seller's attorney sends a contract with a rider. We usually have our own rider, and there's a back and forth. The goal is as quick as possible, especially in today's market, but normally it's about a week or two. And typically the holdup is getting all that due diligence from the managing agent. With a new development, we simply have an offering plan. An offering plan is a thick book. It's a prospectus that the sponsor's attorney drafted. It was approved by the Attorney General's office, which is great. But just because it was approved doesn't mean the building's perfect. That's where we come in to review and analyze and really teach the clients. Again, educate the clients. Sponsors typically want us to sign the contract within 5 business days, although it's pretty funny now with the market being so active. The sponsors' attorneys are actually giving us more time off the bat, more time than ever, because I think they just can't keep up, right? We are seeing more and more new developments hit the market, not the new deals for new developments coming in. A lot of the new developments have been around for a while, but we're seeing more activity in the new development space in the past month or so than in prior months.
Bryan, let's talk about financing. What should people know in terms of those different types of properties, what impact it has on financing?
Yeah, properties are 50% of the battle in the New York market. A lot of times clients come to us and say, oh, I know I'm good. I have my approval from XYZ. And I always say, that's great. What do they know about the building? And they say, I don't know, nothing. And I say, that's a problem. So 50% of the approval process is the buyer. The other 50% is the building. So in New York, it's a very local market where you need to understand it, because the complexity of New York is very different than buying a single family home that may be out in another state. On single family homes, you typically just need an appraisal. Buyer gets a home inspection. Mortgage is very straightforward. On condos and co-ops, it's very different. We do a lot of due diligence, just like the attorney does. We do due diligence on the building. We look at similar things and things that are different, right? So for example, maybe Andrew and his firm are asking questions about, bed bugs or assessments or the current budget in the offering plan. And we're looking at, well, how many units have sold so far? How many people are going to live in the building? Did you do a reserve study to make sure that these common charges in the offering plan are actually going to stick after the day you close? So there's a lot of things that we actually look at that's super important, both on condos and co-ops, that I I highly suggest people that, when you have a pre-approval, it's great to get pre-approved, but make sure you work with a team that's local and understands the local collateral, because it's super important, the building itself.
And then what could you say a little bit more in terms of what options are available when securing a loan for each of these?
Ton of options. So we have over 150 different loan programs, which sounds crazy. It's a lot of programs, right? Most people just think, oh, 30-year fixed. 30-year fixed is great, but there's 30-year fixed at a bunch of different there's a bunch of different options in the back end, because we can do a 30-year fix, but we may need to choose, certain lenders have certain requirements with buildings, right? Again, remember the building is 50% of the approval process. So the first-time home buyers and in new construction in general, I think that a large percent of buyers are still going for a 30-year fixed rate. I'd probably say 90% of clients want a 30-year fix, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I tell people you can never go wrong with it, right? It's never a bad option. It is, though, the most expensive rate option. The shorter the term, so if you do a 15-year or 20-year, the rates are actually lower. Then same thing, if you go to an adjustable rate, the rates are actually lower also. But the monthly payments vary not so much depending on product. So I always tell people to get educated on the products, see the payment difference, right? Because everyone's like, what's your rate? What's your rate? I tell people a payment sometimes and they're like, oh, that's great. And then they hang up and call me back and say, wait, what's the rate? I'm like, you're making a payment, right? You have a rate. And someone this morning, I was talking to a friend of mine, gave me an analogy, like when you buy a car, you typically don't ask what the finance rate is on the car. You're like, what's my monthly payment? So I try and tell people that are buying properties to kind of focus on the monthly payment. If they're comfortable on the monthly payment is super important, and not so worry so much about the fractional difference of the interest rate, because maybe you found something on Bank of the Internet or something like that that seems like it's better. You don't want to go down that path. Again, you want to keep it local and with experts who are very familiar with the market.
Let's talk about new development. What do you think are some important points that buyers should know when it comes to number of contracts or sales?
Yeah, so I think there's two big things on my end that we get a lot with new development. Number one is, when are we going to close, right? And I think Vanessa gets the same question and Andrew gets the same question. And it's a super hard question because a lot of things go into when am I going to close? So for me as a lender, we can close within 30 days. That's typically what I tell people. In New York, the average timeline is double or triple that because of condo approvals, because of co-op approvals. New construction is different. You're waiting on the city. You're waiting on inspections. You're waiting on, elevator sign-offs and tax lot being apportioned. So it's very complex. So I would first tell people that if you're looking at new construction, the timing that it takes, you always want to pad that timing. Okay, so there's a benefit of new construction because you're the first one in. It's a brand new place. No one has lived there. You're picking your layout. You're picking your unit. You're picking your view. You're seeing it live. The issue that comes is we don't know when you're going to close. That's number one. We give you, the building will give you an estimate. The estimate is not your closing date. That's number one. Second thing I would tell people, rate locking. Rate locking is a touchy subject on new construction. 95% of people want to lock a rate before they even have a contract on any property. We give somebody a pre-approval. They're like, I want to lock my rate. I'm like, what's the address? They're like, we don't have an address. I'm like, what are we doing? Rate locks are time specific. Typically 60 days, 90 days is kind of industry standard for rate locks. We do have special rate locks for longer term for new construction. So that is available up to 2-year rate locks, which is super long. They're not free though, guys. So for you guys that are on the call and like, oh, we can just lock for 2 years and it's free. It's not free. There's a cost involved. But there is an option to lock longer term, which is a big benefit. So 2 things I would tell you. 1, find out about longer term rate locks and if they're right for you. And second, the timing, you have to be flexible, right? I know that it's hard to understand and it's like, oh, you go see a property and it looks done. It can look done, but it doesn't mean they're ready to close. So I tell people have patience with that. Don't exit your lease. Don't, go into, you have, movers and storage company lined up outside your house. Wait until this developer's ready. And most of them have to give you a 30-day notice to close. So that's kind of 2 words of advice on my end.
I mean, I have to imagine a lot of this is really talking to people one-on-one and working with them with their financial situation or what their goals are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone's situation is different and we get it a lot. It's like, I went on xyz.com and I see the rates this. And I'm like, it is that if you're buying X, if you're closing in a certain amount of time, if your credit score is this, and like, oh, it's not for me. No. So everyone's situation is different. Everyone's shoe is not the same size.
Obviously you discussed how the rates can vary depending on a lot of different things, but could you share a little bit about what mortgage rates and lending requirements look like for these different types of properties?
Yeah, absolutely. So with new construction, there's no difference in rate. We don't charge you a higher rate. We don't give you a lower rate. You get whatever the best is available in the market. Um, and the rates right now, I mean, we've been saying we're at historic lows for a long time, right? And I tell people right now that we're spoiled. It's just the bottom line. I mean, everyone on this call probably has a story of their cousin, their mother, their friend, their own mortgage. It was probably 6%, 9%, 10%. I'm sure someone on there is saying to themselves, 18%. You have someone that had that kind of rate. So I would tell you the rates right now today, we're in the upper twos on fixed rates, which is just incredible. And a 15-year fix in the low twos, adjustable in the low twos. So rates right now have a two in front of them if you're qualified. So disclaimer here in case my company is monitoring this call. Kidding, but yeah, it depends on credit score, things like that. But the advertised rates and kind of best rates that people qualify are still in the twos right now, which is just extremely attractive, and it's a great time to kind of borrow money, especially at these low rates.
Give a little expectation in terms of closing costs. Well, what should people prepare for in terms of beyond obviously the purchase price?
Yeah, so specifically in new development, they have different costs sometimes than a resale. And I think again, get yourself a great broker like Vanessa and Vanessa's team who can walk you through as experts of, hey, what maybe she may be able to negotiate, what's not negotiable, what is sold in the past. Like getting the data behind it will help tailor, an offer specific for you. But in general, closing costs, as a rough estimate, I usually tell clients, depending on the purchase price, higher the purchase price, the higher the closing cost. Because in New York, mansion tax kicks in over $1 million and is tiered up. Once you go to 2 million, it's one and a quarter, and keeps going up. The higher the price, the higher the closing cost. I generally tell people on condos, new development, closing costs are going to range between 4 and 6% of the purchase price. And we customize the options so they can look at it. So for example, if you're buying something for $1 million, prepare between $40,000 and $60,000 for closing costs. But I tell people, send us an address, give us an idea of price and how much you're doing for down payment. And down payment comes into the closing costs as well. Because certain taxes are based on the loan amount, which is one of mortgage taxes, one of the most expensive closing costs in the 5 boroughs. So we customize it for anyone who's looking. We can put together something, kind of walk you through how much it costs and show you kind of an itemized breakdown of where each cost goes, which I think is super helpful. But be prepared, 4 to 6% of the price, it's not included. So for all you guys out there that say, oh, I've got 20% down, you need 20% down plus the closing costs. And then as a lender, we want to see money in reserves left over. Reserves meaning between 6 months to 12 months and even higher of your monthly mortgage, common charges, and taxes. We don't want you to be left over with no money, because I know you need furniture. I know you're going to have movers. I know things happen in life. So we want to make sure you don't zero out your bank accounts.
All really good information. Thank you. We have some questions coming in and we're going to get to them in a little bit. And I just want to, emphasize, please ask questions. Go to the Q&A or chat, ask away. That's what our panelists are here for. But this one I have to ask you, Vanessa. What Brooklyn neighborhoods offer townhouses?
Oh, so many, and so many different kinds of townhouses. There's brownstone Brooklyn. You can talk about Brooklyn Heights and Park Slope. I love some of the houses in Prospect Heights. Getting into Windsor Terrace. There's gorgeous houses in Sunset Park. There's a lot you can see. A lot of neighborhoods have beautiful architecture and different styles and different stories on how they were built. So Brooklyn's a fantastic place to look for townhouses.
I would almost say, which neighborhood doesn't have a townhouse?
Yeah, it's probably the right answer.
Well, another question for you, Vanessa, is just staying on topic on the questions that we had with Andrew and Bryan. Could you just share with us any tips that you have about the closing process that buyers and their agents should know, and how it really differs between those different property types we discussed, new development, condos, co-ops, et cetera?
Sure. I mean, I think to echo what Bryan was saying with new development, having flexibility is key. I assure you, nobody wants to close more than the developer. They want to close as soon as they can, but If the tax lots aren't done, the lots aren't done. So, staying in touch and talking about that process. And, you might be in a situation with new development as well, where they've already crossed all those hurdles and it's still a brand new unit, but there's immediate occupancy. So that's something you could look for. When it comes to resales, when you're getting into the co-op and condo market, I think it's really a lot of that can be sort of front loaded in the package process. And then you end up working with a great attorney and a great lender, and you're getting into that 30 to 60 day process and how quickly that can happen. But a lot of that's going to be front loaded with that package.
We have a question here, and maybe Vanessa, you could help with this, is just clarifying the difference between a condo and a co-op for people.
Sure. So it really kind of boils down to how you're owning the property. Within a co-op, you're owning shares. That's why you're getting a maintenance charge, which is going to include the maintenance of the building and the taxes. With condos, you're getting real property. That's why you'll have a separate common charge and tax. And Andrew might be able to say it more eloquently than I. But so it's really it's the type of ownership that you're looking for. I think one thing that's important is thinking about how you want to live in the home. If you're thinking that maybe you want to live there for 2 years and then you might want to keep it as an investment, that's something that's pretty important to think about, whether you're looking at a co-op or condo. Sometimes co-ops won't allow rentals or will only allow a few years, whereas condos you could potentially own them as investment properties. Things like that are all going to boil down into how you own the property.
Andrew, I think this question might be for you. The question is, with respect to due diligence, how can we determine the assessment history and the probable future assessments?
So that's the $1 million question. So as part of Bryan was alluding to a due diligence questionnaire. Our questionnaire for resales, for new development, again, we just have that offering plan, is really the most important part of due diligence, because we review board minutes. Sometimes they're not so thorough. Financial statements, 2021 financials aren't out yet. So part of our due diligence questionnaire, we ask for the assessment history over the last 5 years, the maintenance increases or common charge increases over the last 5 years. So there's also different types of assessments. If you're talking about assessments, we've referred to, I think what the question is about, building assessments, right? Buildings have reserve funds, most buildings. And even if they don't, if they even have a small reserve fund, it's not the end of the world. It depends building to building. And buildings, need to raise money, right? Their roof, has an issue, or they want to update the lobby. Sometimes they take money from the reserves, or sometimes they assess for those projects. Sometimes, most of the time, they do a combination. So we can find out what they've done over the past few years. Finding the future, too far into the future, nobody can tell you that, but, sometimes the past kind of predicts the future, not always. But you look at, the flow of the building over the last few years, and find out, the reserve fund is adequate. So, we certainly look for, a certain percentage of the budget, in reserve funds. But again, especially in the Brooklyn market, you have small buildings, even Manhattan, that sometimes they don't have reserve funds, right? I have a house in the suburbs. I have a savings account, fortunately. I don't have a reserve fund for my house. And small buildings, if they need to raise money, they will. It's not always so, the old world of Park Avenue having millions of dollars in reserves and impressing your neighbors is not so smart anymore, because when you go to sell your apartment, you don't get that money back, right? So you want your expenses when you're owned tight. You don't want your common charges or maintenance out of this world. You want them as tight as possible, so your fees are tight. And when you, again, the huge reserve fund isn't always so smart, right? When you go to sell your place, right, you as a purchaser are looking for low maintenance, right, or fair maintenance, right? You don't want an apartment with huge maintenance and a huge reserve fund, because it impacts your expenses, and then going to Bryan impacts your ability to get a loan, right? So it all factors in.
I'm seeing questions here and I have to address it because, sometimes attorney fees and this and that. One thing I can personally say is everyone on this is probably looking to spend, 6 to 7 figures on a new home, which is a tremendous investment. And my personal advice is don't skimp on the attorney because you want to be protected with your most valuable asset. So I think, that's what's great about having the three of them up here is like you really, I can't emphasize it enough. You have to have the great team of the real estate agent broker, the mortgage broker, and the attorney, and never short yourself. So, we're thrilled to have the three of them here, but just to address some of these questions here. There's a question here, Bryan, could you comment on people that are seniors, whether or not that plays against them? I don't know if the question was related strictly to age or potentially maybe not having a current income stream.
Yeah, so there's no age requirement. You can be, for being older. I mean, I've done 30-year loans for people in their 90s without a problem. So there's no maximum age by any means. We do look at income for every loan to make sure the client has ability to repay. It's important that when we lend money, we want to make sure that they qualify based on certain standards and guidelines to make sure they can repay the loan. So we look at certain things like debt to income ratio, credit scores, money post closing. All those things are kind of taken into consideration when we qualify a customer to purchase a property.
I'm sorry, I'm just reading through. We had a bunch of questions pop in here, which is great. Vanessa, this is an interesting question. There used to be a lot of talk, I feel like, about opportunities with foreclosed properties. Is there a market for foreclosed properties at this time?
It's I was looking recently for somebody, and I saw one, but I haven't seen a lot. It's not my level of expertise. But I haven't seen many of late. I don't know, maybe Andrew or Bryan could talk about what they're seeing.
It's not a big part of the space we play in. There's certainly, probably people that specialize in it, but I mean, Brooklyn and Manhattan market, even Queens these days, it's the average purchase prices are, dictate, most borrowers not defaulting on their loans.
Somebody here said 7 figures. Who has that in today's economy? Do you know that the mayoral debate, one of the candidates literally was out of the race because he missed the average cost of a home in Brooklyn by, I think, $700,000. I believe the average price was about $900,000. I don't know, Vanessa, if that's roughly in the ballpark, but I believe that
I think that's about right.
Yeah.
So yeah, Brooklyn is certainly an emerging market, and I think a lot of you should be aware of that. Yeah, the average home price is close to $1 million in the borough of Brooklyn. There's another question here, whether or not a married couple, if one person doesn't have income, how that can be treated, Bryan.
Absolutely. Somebody can apply for a mortgage on an individual income, a joint income. We would typically look at the whole scenario. Who's going to be occupying the house? What do they do for work? What are the credit scores? But if you're married, you don't need, it's not a requirement here where you have to have both incomes, both credit on the loan. We can choose just, primary wage earner, and do it that way. We also have programs where you can add co-signers to help for qualifying. And we see it a lot with parents, even grandparents that help co-sign for buyers in this market to get property. We see it a lot near colleges, NYU, Columbia. A lot of kids that come here from all over the US and even outside have parents that, say, oh, I'm not going to pay that rent amount, we can buy. And the parents help. They either give a gift, they co-sign, they do all kinds of things to help their kids and help them achieve home ownership.
Yes, I think this is a good question to address in regards to new developments. The person here in the audience says, I've been cautioned against purchases as historically there are construction issues. Even the new building on Billionaires Road have had serious problems. What would you say to people that are hesitant about new developments?
You're always welcome to ask and should not be dissuaded from having an inspection. There are certain warranties that are going to be in place, if a roof is new, with appliances, things like that. There can be kinks worked out. I think you can look at the developer, look at their track record, have an attorney do good due diligence. A lot of the major developers in the city are known, and an attorney is going to be able to tell you about that. Kinks can happen, but I would say, if you're moving into an older building, that's not going to mean that you're not going to have any problems, that you're not going to have to pay to have something repointed. You're hoping that you're working with somebody and you're doing the due diligence that you're working with somebody who's building well and, building to good standards. And by all means, ask to have a building inspection, have somebody come in and look at it, kick the tires, make sure that you can feel comfortable with it.
You know what's interesting now, when we say new development, I think there's different types of new development, right? There's new development that you're buying from a developer, the building's there. People are living in the apartment, right? There's new development that I think a lot of people that aren't so common anymore, where they haven't broken ground yet. They haven't laid a brick yet. So most deals in today's market are actually there. The building's there. You can touch, you can feel it. As Vanessa said, you can do an inspection. So I call it the old new development and the new development. A lot of these buildings I think they're starting to come, new ones are starting to be built. But most, I'd say, I'm guessing 90% of new development deals right now, the projects are almost, completed. So it's not, back in the day where you look at a floor plan in a showroom and the lot is just empty, right? They just knocked down the prior building. So purchasers are a lot more comfortable in today's world than say 5-10 years ago.
Just to get back on track on some of the questions that I had, and please continue to ask the audience, continue to ask questions that you have. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Again, we will be sending out contact information for each of our panelists so that you can speak to them one-on-one, because that's probably, highly advisable if you're a serious buyer. But Andrew, talk a little bit more about due diligence. You touched on a little bit about a questionnaire, but what kind of due diligence do you conduct on those different types of properties that you can expand upon?
Yeah. So I guess the big picture, we want to look at the building, legally, right? That it's, set up correctly, from a tax standpoint. From a practical standpoint, leaks, crazy neighbors, noise complaints, bed bugs, mice. Fortunately, bed bugs aren't a common issue as they used to be. And even financially, right? We do review financial statements. A lot of buildings have audited financials, right? So we can see what the reserve fund is, see if they're operating at a loss or profit. Again, a small loss or a non-substantial loss is not the end of the world. So it usually takes about a week or two to obtain this information. A lot of clients want us to look at the sublet policy, right? Maybe down the line they want to rent out the apartment. Alteration agreement, we get that. Certainly the purchase application. A lot of this stuff, it's really our job to teach and educate. These due diligence documents are not negotiable. And just kind of big picture, put things in perspective. We do thousands of deals. 99% of buyers are fine with the building. I always say no building's perfect. Every building has some sort of issue, but very, very, very rarely does a buyer not proceed on a deal because the building has poor financials or the building comes back, with our review negatively. Again, it's our job to say, hey, listen, the reserve fund is tight. You may get hit with an assessment. Hey, we saw the last 5 years, the maintenance went up 2 to 5% a year. We can, maybe expect that going forward. The sublet policy is strict. Hey, this building doesn't allow, adult children to live in the apartment without the parents. Hey, there's this fee for the storage. Litigation, that's a big one. Is the litigation covered by insurance? So it runs the gamut, again, financially, legally, and even I like the practical aspect, like what's really happening. A lot of clients, and we have, highly sophisticated people in our city that there's so much information out there. Most of the time, they're not analyzing the information correctly, right? There's a reasonable standard, a relative standard. I even have accountants that review financial statements and, clients want to loop in their accountants and they just don't see this stuff every day. It's a very nuanced business, right? And only after doing, comparing to thousands of deals, can you say, hey, this is reasonable. This isn't outrageous. This is the norm. Or maybe, hey, this isn't the norm, but is it a big issue? So it's a big conversation. And, initially it seems very abstract, I think, to clients. But once we give them the information and once we sit on the phone with them for an hour or however long it takes, they have a very clear idea as to what's involved.
What about home inspections, Andrew? Do you always recommend those?
It's interesting. Home inspections are not repeat, are not the norm in our city unless, of course, it's a townhouse, right? A small building. My rule of thumb for condos and co-ops is 10 units and under. There's a reason why. Number one, bigger buildings won't give you access to the major systems of the building, the roof, the boiler, for liability reasons. Number two, most of our contracts will say the major systems of the apartment have to be delivered in working order. The plumbing, heating, electricity. All kidding aside, you don't need a professional to tell you if your 1-bedroom apartment that's 500 square feet or 700 square feet, if the outlet's working, right? Vanessa has been probably in thousands of apartments, and she does the brokers, you do a walkthrough before the closing, a final walkthrough. I always tell clients, don't feel pressured, take your time and test the outlets, turn on the burners, turn on the stove, turn on the oven, test the water. Listen, I also tell clients, if you want an inspection, if you can't sleep at night, do an inspection, 1000%. The idea with inspections, not to get too far into the weeds, sellers and sellers brokers don't love them because they think it's going to delay the deal. So we need to order the inspection right away, right when your offer is accepted. I also tell clients, you take, all kidding aside, what the inspector says, not with a grain of salt, but with a bag of salt, because it's their job to tell you every little thing that's wrong with the apartment. And even if you're buying a new development, nothing's perfect, right? So their scale is a 10 out of 10. And you go there and you see, hey, the water looks fine to me. It's an 8 out of 10, which is a reasonable standard. So you're not buying typically a brand new, perfect, pristine apartment. So you have to, when I get an inspection report back from the professional, I don't read it initially. I email them back right away, say, what are the major issues? Are there major issues? Right? So again, you're not buying a home, a 5-bedroom house. Most people are buying a 1-2 bedroom apartment where it's really not necessary. But again, if clients, feel the need, we want them to be comfortable, right? I don't want somebody worrying about the transaction, but there are real reasons. And also, most importantly, or equally as important, when you buy an apartment, you're only responsible for your apartment, right? Anything inside the walls, anything in between the walls is the building responsibility. You're part of the building. So your responsibility as a unit owner compared to a house is very different. It's much more limited.
Great perspective. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk a little bit though, Andrew, about contract period. How long should someone expect that period of time for a new construction condo?
Yeah, I think Bryan and Vanessa touched on it very well. With new development, you take what they say and say, like, it depends. If someone says, hey, we're closing, early January of 2022, I say add 3 months to whatever they say. But I think as Vanessa said, the most important line, it's all about perspective, right? The sponsor has more incentive to close than you do. They're not intentionally delaying the deal. They're not making money till they close, but they don't control the city. They don't control the Department of Finance, right? They don't control the Department of Buildings, more importantly. So if it's, and this is just very general, but if it's a year out, maybe you add 6 months to that. The way we protect clients, and Bryan touched on this, the Attorney General mandates a 30-day notice. We build in extra time in a adjournment period of another 15, 20 days. So the idea is, and Vanessa and myself are keeping tabs with the sponsor attorney. We're checking in every few months to see how things are going. But if you're financing, right, there's only so much work the bank can do ahead of time, right? Things have to come together. So we want the buyer and the bank to have time to get their things in order, right? They'll do work preliminarily, but we don't want too much anxiety. We want to try to reduce the amount of anxiety with these transactions. So we, to give reasonable expectations, a lot of real estate is rush, wait, wait, go. So we build in also, just so you know, a drop dead date. And this is important, in today's world. I used to use the example of a crane accident. Right now, unfortunately, COVID's another example. They say, hey, we'll close a year out. We say, listen, if you can't close for a year and 6 months or 2 years, we need to give you flexibility. We need to give the sponsor time to get things done, but we also need some protection. If it takes forever to close, we need the ability to cancel the deal and get our money back. One other piece is, and it's very frustrating, this is getting a little detailed, but the sponsors can actually send out a 30-day closing notice before they're legally ready, when they anticipate they're going to get, the temporary certificate of occupancy, when they anticipate they can close. And they can also delay that, right? So it's not guaranteed, even though you get a 30-day notice, and it's frustrating. It's, we've alluded to that you kind of have to sit back and be flexible and not get too anxious. understand that, it's a moving target, but we know, all three of us, all the sponsors, law firms, we know the sponsors, brokers. So there's a conversation. They're not always transparent because they don't always have the information. They're relying on the Department of Buildings, who's inundated. And even pre-COVID, it wasn't a model of efficiency. Right now it's worse. So that's the struggle.
Andrew, staying on the topic of new buildings, is it a requirement for them to have permanent certificate of occupancies before
No. So any deal,
a buyer goes through the purchase?
Yeah, the standard is at least a TCO, temporary certificate of occupancy.
Temporary. Okay.
All banks will finance with a TCO. It means the apartment's habitable. You don't get a permanent until everything's done. Most of the time, this is actually important to know, you have to close as long as your apartment is habitable. You can get there safely. They usually do the amenities last, right? So you won't have a final C of O until all the amenities, the building's completely done. So you may actually have to move in before all the amenities, if there are amenities, if they're completed.
And then, last question for you, Andrew. We talked a little bit about problems that potentially can come up with new developments. How do you protect the buyers against property defects in a new construction?
Yeah, well, we look at the warranties for the building. Not all buildings have warranties. Listen, it's very difficult to be transparent to protect somebody, a year after they close, the windows are defective, right? We don't know about that. So sometimes, and it's not often, but obviously the worst case scenario is dramatic. Very rarely do we have clients, we're doing hundreds of new developments, call me and say, Andrew, you're never going to believe it. There's all these issues. Thankfully, it make things a little more rough. But listen, the courts are the option, right? I've seen, deals where I think somebody was alluding to a reference 432 Park, where the building, all the unit owners, and you don't have to be a billionaire, right? You have a 50 unit, condo in Brooklyn where average purchase price is $500,000, right? You may have to band together with the other unit owners and go after the sponsor. That is a dramatic situation. So post-closing, there's not so much protection, right? Because we're at most representations in the contract don't survive closing, meaning once you close, some buildings do have warranties. And if a building doesn't have a warranty, it doesn't mean it's, no good, right? It's just there's different structures to each deal.
A lot to know, everybody. That's why it's great to have you guys here. Vanessa, what else would you like to share with our audience or touch on that we can talk about with the market?
I think I would say for anybody that's looking, it's really good to find somebody that you have a rapport with. These are big questions, having somebody that'll take the time to talk with you about things. One thing that I would say too is when you're getting started, everybody has an idea about what they want. Maybe try something new out, go see a few different places. You may have a certain idea of really what you want, but I think at the beginning, getting to look at different types of units, different styles is going to be helpful throughout the process.
Well, this was a great conversation. I want to thank you, Vanessa Connelly, Bryan Scott Cohen, Andrew Luftig. Terrific information. Again, all of our participants, we're going to be emailing you their contact information. They want to hear from you. That's what they're here for. And a thank you to our sponsors, GR Affinity, Chaves, Perlowitz, and Luftig, and the Aguayo team of Brown, Harris, Stevens. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Great to see everybody. Take care.